Juliet returned to her parents' village in Nsukka, to the small compound she'd grown up in. Her old room was exactly as she'd left it. The narrow bed, the wooden wardrobe, the faded curtains. After months in George's mansion, it felt both strange and comforting to be back in this simple place. Her mother fussed over her constantly, making sure she ate, monitoring her health, treating her like she was made of glass. Her father said little, but his anger was palpable. "He will never touch you again," was all he said, but Juliet heard the promise of violence in his voice if George ever came near her. For the first time in months, Juliet felt safe. She could breathe without fear. She could sleep without wondering when the next beating would come. The village women whispered when she walked past. They knew she'd left her husband, and in their eyes she could see both sympathy and judgment. But she didn't care anymore. As her pregnancy progressed, Juliet began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She would have her baby, and they would be safe here away from George. She would raise her child with her parents' help, and somehow they would be okay. But when she was 5 months pregnant, reality came knocking in the form of a letter. It was from George's lawyer, demanding that she return to her husband's house immediately or face legal consequences. Juliet tore up the letter. 2 weeks later, George himself appeared at her parents' compound with his brothers and his lawyer. Juliet's father met them at the gate, his machete in his hand. "Leave my compound," he said quietly. "I just want to see my wife," George said, his voice reasonable, controlled. "She's not your wife anymore," Juliet's mother shouted from the doorway. "You lost that right when you tried to kill her and her baby." "That's a lie," George said, turning to his brothers and lawyer. "See how they're brainwashing her? Juliet!" He raised his voice. "Juliet, come out here. Tell them the truth. Tell them it was an accident." Juliet appeared in the doorway, her pregnant belly visible beneath her wrapper. George's eyes softened when he saw her. "Baby, please. I'm sorry. I made mistakes, but I love you. Come home. Our child deserves to grow up with both parents. I promise I'll change. I swear it on my father's grave. I'll never hurt you again." For a moment, just a moment, Juliet almost believed him. He looked so sincere, so regretful. And she thought about her child growing up without a father, growing up in poverty when George could provide everything. "Don't listen to him, Juliet," her mother said urgently, as if reading her thoughts. "He said that before, and look what happened." But George kept talking, his voice honey-sweet. "Think of our child, Juliet. Think of the life I can give our baby, the best schools, the best health care, everything. Here, what can they offer? Poverty? Struggle? Is that what you want for our child?" That question pierced Juliet's heart because it was her own fear. She loved her parents, but they barely had enough for themselves. How would they support her and a baby? How would she survive? "Give me time to think," she finally said. George smiled. "Take all the time you need. But remember, I'm your husband. That's my child you're carrying. We belong together." After they left, Juliet's parents begged her not to consider going back. "Money isn't everything," her father said. "We'll manage. We'll survive. But if you go back to him, he might kill you next time." Juliet knew they were right. But over the next few weeks, as her pregnancy advanced and she thought about her baby's future, doubt crept in. It was at the market in Nsukka that Juliet met Raymond. She was 6 months pregnant, buying tomatoes for her mother, when she felt dizzy and stumbled. Strong hands caught her before she fell. "Are you all right?" a deep voice asked. Juliet looked up into the kindest eyes she'd ever seen. The man was tall and well-built, with an honest face and genuine concern in his expression. "I'm fine, just dizzy," she said, embarrassed. "Let me help you." He carried her basket and insisted on walking her home, asking careful questions about her health, her pregnancy. When they reached her parents' compound, he introduced himself. "I'm Raymond Nwosu. I'm working on a construction project here in Nsukka for the next few months." "I'm Juliet. Thank you for helping me." "It was nothing." He smiled warmly. "Please take care of yourself and that baby." Over the following weeks, Juliet kept running into Raymond, at the market, at the chemist where she bought her prenatal vitamins, at the church she attended with her mother. Each time, he was friendly and respectful, asking how she was feeling, never prying but always kind. One Sunday after church, he approached her with a bag of fruits. "For the baby," he said simply. pregnant women need plenty of fruits. Juliet was touched by the gesture. They began talking regularly, and she found herself looking forward to their conversations. Raymond was everything George wasn't: gentle, patient, genuinely interested in what she had to say. He made her laugh for the first time in months. One evening, as they sat under the mango tree in her parents' compound, Raymond finally asked the question, "The baby's father, where is he?" Juliet's smile faded. "It's complicated. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." "No, I want to tell you." And for the first time, she told someone who wasn't family the whole truth. She told Raymond about George's deception, the abuse, the beatings, the women, how his family had turned against her, how he'd almost killed her and their baby. She cried as she spoke, and Raymond listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each revelation. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Juliet," he finally said, "I'm so sorry you went through that. No woman deserves that. Ever. I'm thinking about going back," she admitted in a small voice. "For the baby. So my child can have a father, can have a better life." "No." Raymond's voice was firm. "Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to your child. Children don't need wealth, they need safety. They need a mother who's alive and whole, not one broken by abuse." "But I can't give my baby what George can." "Let me help you," Raymond said suddenly. "What?" "I'm not rich like your husband, but I'm doing well. Let me help you with the baby when it comes. Medical expenses, whatever you need. And after the baby is born, if you want to leave this village, start fresh somewhere else, I'll help you with that too." "Why would you do that?" Juliet asked, confused. "You don't even know me." Raymond looked at her steadily. "Because I believe everyone deserves a chance to start over. And because..." He hesitated, then continued. "Because I care about you, Juliet. I know it might seem fast, and I know you're going through so much, but I've never met anyone like you. You're strong and brave, and you deserve so much better than what life has given you." When Juliet was 8 months pregnant, George came back. This time he came with his mother and sisters, putting on a show of remorse. They begged Juliet's parents to send her back, promising that George had changed, that he was attending anger management classes, that things would be different. "Let her come home to deliver the baby at least," George's mother pleaded. "After the baby is born, if she's still unhappy, we can discuss other options." Juliet's parents were unmoved, but Juliet herself was wavering. The baby was coming soon, and she was afraid. What if something went wrong during delivery? Her parents couldn't afford a good private hospital. And what about after? How would she cope with a newborn? Raymond's offer echoed in her mind, but accepting it felt like too much to ask of someone she'd known only a few months. That night, without telling her parents, Juliet made a decision. She packed a small bag and left a note, and before dawn, she returned to George's house. When her mother found the note, she wept for hours. Juliet moved back into their house at Independence Layout, and for a week, George was perfect. He was attentive, sweet, apologetic. He prepared the nursery with expensive baby furniture, hired the best doctor in Enugu to handle the delivery, bought tiny clothes in both pink and blue since they didn't know the baby's gender yet. "See," he would say, holding her gently, "I told you I could change. We're going to be a proper family, Juliet. I promise you." But the mask always falls eventually. One evening, when Juliet was 9 months pregnant and huge with the baby, a woman came to the door. She was beautiful and heavily made up, wearing a tight dress that showed every curve. "I'm here to see George," she announced, pushing past Juliet into the house. George came out of the bedroom, and his face showed no shame when he saw both women. "Anna, you're early. Anna," Juliet repeated, recognizing the name of the woman who had been in her bed before. "You're still seeing her? Don't start, Juliet," George warned. "I'm 9 months pregnant with your child, and you're still bringing your mistress to our house. I said don't start." George's voice rose dangerously. Anna stood there smirking, clearly enjoying Juliet's humiliation. "Your husband promised to marry me," she said sweetly. "He says as soon as you deliver his son, he'll divorce you and marry me properly." The words hit Juliet like bullets. She looked at George, waiting for him to deny it, but he just shrugged. "You heard her. I need a woman who respects me, who doesn't run home to her parents at every small thing." "You've been a disappointment, Juliet." Something broke inside Juliet then, something that had been barely holding together. She turned without a word and walked out of the house, out the gate, into the night. She walked for blocks, tears streaming down her face, her pregnant belly making each step difficult. She didn't even know where she was going until she found herself at a phone kiosk. She called Raymond. "Please," she sobbed into the phone. "Please help me." Raymond came for her within the hour, bringing his sister with him for propriety. When he saw Juliet standing on the roadside in the dark, heavily pregnant and crying, his jaw tightened with anger. "I'm taking you to a safe place," he said gently. "You're never going back there. Never." He took her to a very expensive and clean flat he bought in a quiet part of Enugu. His sister stayed with them, helping Juliet settle in. 2 days later, Juliet went into labor. Raymond rushed her to the hospital, paced the waiting room for 12 hours, and was the first person she saw when she woke up after delivering a healthy baby boy. Juliet named her son, Shinidu, meaning God leads. As she held him in her arms that first night, looking at his tiny, perfect face, she knew she would do whatever it took to protect him from George's violence. With Raymond's help, she filed for divorce. George immediately fought back with his money and lawyers. He filed for full custody, claiming Juliet was an unfit mother who had abandoned her home. His lawyers painted her as unstable, mentally ill, a woman who ran away when marriage got difficult. They made her sound like a villain while portraying George as the wronged husband. "He'll win," Juliet said to Raymond one evening, holding Shinidu close. "He has money, power, connections. What do I have?" "You have the truth," Raymond said firmly. "And you have me." Raymond hired a lawyer, a tough, experienced woman named Mrs. Namani, who had handled many abuse cases. "We need evidence," Mrs. Namani said. "Medical records, witnesses, anything that proves the abuse." Juliet provided hospital records from all the times George had beaten her. The nurses who had treated her agreed to testify. Even some of George's neighbors came forward, saying they'd heard Juliet screaming and had seen her with bruises. During this difficult time, Raymond was Juliet's rock. He helped with the baby when she was too overwhelmed, paid for her lawyer, made sure she and Shinidu had everything they needed. Slowly, Juliet began to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. She began to smile again, to laugh, to see a future beyond just survival. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked Raymond one night after they'd put Shinidu to bed. Raymond looked at her for a long moment. "At first, I thought I was just helping someone in need. But the truth is, Juliet, I've fallen in love with you. Not just with your strength, though you're the strongest woman I know, but with who you are, your kindness, your courage, the way you love your son. I know this isn't the right time, and I'm not asking you for anything. But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you ever feel the same way, I'll be here. I'll be here for you and Shinidu for as long as you'll have me." Juliet felt tears welling up, but this time they were different. Not tears of pain or fear, but of hope, of gratitude, of something that might one day become love. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Meanwhile, the custody battle raged on. George was confident he would win. "I'm his father," he told his lawyer. "I have money, a mansion, everything a child needs. What can she offer? That poverty rat she's living with? Please, the judge will see reason." But during the court proceedings, something unexpected happened. George's girlfriend, Anna, took the stand. Mrs. Namani had tracked her down and convinced her to testify. "Tell us about your relationship with Mr. George," Mrs. Namani said. Anna glanced nervously at George, then began to speak. She told the court about their affair, about how George had promised to leave Juliet for her, about how he'd brought her to his matrimonial home repeatedly while his pregnant wife was there. But then she said something that made everyone in the courtroom gasp. "He has a terrible temper," Anna said quietly. "He beat me too, several times. Once, he hit me so hard I had to go to the hospital. I was afraid to leave him because he threatened to destroy my life if I did." George's lawyer jumped up, objecting furiously, but the damage was done. The judge's face had gone cold as he looked at George. When it was Juliet's turn to testify, she told her story calmly, showing her medical records, her scars. She didn't cry or get emotional, she simply told the truth. And the truth was devastating. After weeks of testimony, the judge made his ruling. "Mr. George," he said, his voice hard, "you are clearly a man who believes money can buy anything, including the right to abuse women. But in my courtroom, wealth means nothing when weighed against character. Mrs. Juliet has proven beyond doubt that you are violent, unrepentant, and a danger to her and potentially to the child. I am granting her full custody. You will be allowed supervised visitation only, and you will pay child support. Furthermore, I am referring your case to the police for investigation into domestic violence." George exploded in rage, shouting at the judge, at Juliet, at everyone. Security had to escort him out of the courtroom. Juliet held Chinedu close and cried tears of relief. She had won. Her son was safe. But the story didn't end there. 2 months after the court ruling, tragedy struck. Juliet heard the news on television while feeding Chinedu. Enugu businessman George Okafor has been arrested for the murder of his girlfriend, Anna Obi. The young woman's body was found in Mr. George's residence with signs of severe trauma consistent with a violent assault. Juliet's hands began to shake so badly, she had to put down Chinedu's bottle. According to the news report, George and Anna had gotten into a heated argument about her testimony in court. George had accused her of betraying him, of ruining his life. In his rage, he had beaten her, just like he'd beaten Juliet so many times. But this time he didn't stop. This time he went too far. Anna died from her injuries. When Raymond came over that evening and found Juliet staring at the television in shock, he held her close. "It could have been you," he said quietly. "If you'd stayed, if you'd gone back and stayed, it could have been you, Juliet." The trial for Anna's murder was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. George's house staff had heard everything, had seen him beating Anna, had called the police too late. George was sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder. As Juliet watched him being led away in handcuffs on the television, she felt no satisfaction, no joy. Only a deep sadness for Anna, who had died at the hands of the same man who had almost killed her, and relief that she and Chinedu had escaped that fate. In the months that followed, Juliet slowly built a new life. Raymond continued to be patient and supportive, never pushing her but always there. He played with Chinedu as if the boy were his own son, making him laugh with silly faces, singing him lullabies when Juliet was too exhausted to move. One evening, when Chinedu was 8 months old and had just taken his first wobbly steps, Juliet watched Raymond catch him before he fell, watched the pure joy on Raymond's face, and felt something shift in her heart. After putting Chinedu to bed that night, she found Raymond in the living room. "Raymond," she said softly, and he looked up at her. "I need to tell you something." He stood up, concern on his face. "What is it? Is everything okay?" Everything is better than okay," she said, moving closer to him. "For months, you've been nothing but kind and patient with me. You've never asked me for anything, never pressured me, never made me feel like I owe you. You've just loved me, loved us. And I need you to know that somewhere along the way, when I wasn't looking, I fell in love with you too." Raymond's eyes widened, then filled with emotion. "Juliet, I'm not completely healed yet," she continued, her voice shaking slightly. "There are still nights when I wake up from nightmares about George. There are still moments when I flinch at sudden movements. I'm still learning how to trust again, how to believe that love doesn't have to hurt. But with you, I want to try. With you, I feel safe enough to try." Raymond crossed the distance between them and took her hands gently in his. "We'll go as slowly as you need," he said. "I don't need anything except to be here with you and Chinedu. We'll heal together, and we'll build something beautiful, something real, something that's ours." They stood there in the quiet living room, holding hands, and for the first time in over a year, Juliet felt truly at peace. 6 months later, Raymond formally asked Juliet to marry him. It wasn't grand or elaborate, just the two of them and Chinedu at the beach in Lagos, watching the sunset. "I don't have as much money as your ex-husband," Raymond said with a small smile, kneeling in the sand. "But I promise you something more valuable. I promise you respect, partnership, and a love that heals instead of hurts. I promise to be the father Chinedu deserves and the husband you've always deserved. Will you marry me, Juliet?" Through happy tears, Juliet said yes. Their wedding was small and simple, just family and close friends at her parents' village. Juliet's mother cried throughout the ceremony, but this time they were tears of joy. Her father, who had remained stoic through all of Juliet's suffering, broke down when he handed her over to Raymond, whispering, "This is what I prayed for, a man who will treasure you." As Juliet and Raymond exchanged vows under the same mango tree where they'd first shared their hearts, with little Chinita toddling between them, Juliet reflected on her journey. She thought about the girl she'd been when she first met George. Naive, trusting, desperate to please. She thought about the broken woman she'd become under his abuse, how she'd almost lost herself completely. And now, looking at Raymond's honest face, feeling Chinita's small hand clutching her dress, seeing her parents' joyful tears, she realized something profound. The violence hadn't destroyed her. The betrayal hadn't broken her. The suffering hadn't stolen her capacity to love and trust again. She had survived. More than survived. She had escaped, fought back, reclaimed her life, and found real love on the other side of her nightmare. Years later, when Chinita was old enough to understand, Juliet would tell him about his biological father. She would be honest but kind, explaining that some people carry pain inside them that makes them hurt others, that his father had been such a man. But she would also tell him about Raymond, the man who chose to be his father, who taught him to ride a bicycle, who helped with homework, who showed him what true manhood looked like. Strength used to protect, not to harm. Love that uplifted, not destroyed. Juliet never forgot Anna. Every year on the anniversary of her death, Juliet lit a candle and said a prayer for the young woman who had testified against George, whose bravery had helped Juliet win custody, but who had paid the ultimate price for being trapped in George's web of violence. She started a small support group in Nsukka for abused women, meeting weekly in a church hall, sharing her story to give others hope that escape was possible. As for George, rotting away in prison, Juliet rarely thought of him. She had forgiven him, not for his sake, but for her own peace. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what he'd done. It meant refusing to let him continue to poison her life with bitterness and hatred. He had taken enough from her. She wouldn't give him her future too. On quiet evenings, when Raymond was putting Chinita to bed and their new baby daughter, Amara, which means grace, slept peacefully in her crib, Juliet would stand by the window of their modest but warm home and feel overwhelming gratitude. She had escaped death. She had found love. She had built a family rooted in kindness and respect. The journey had been brutal. The scars, both visible and invisible, were real, but she had survived. And in surviving, in choosing to leave, in fighting for her son, in opening her heart to Raymond, she had done more than just escape an abusive marriage. She had reclaimed her life. She had found herself again. And she had discovered that the happy ending she'd once dreamed of, one based on wealth and status, was nothing compared to the life she now had, built on honesty, partnership, and genuine love. Some nights, when the old nightmares came, Raymond would wake with her, hold her until the shaking stopped, remind her that she was safe, that George could never hurt her again. And slowly, month by month, year by year, those nightmares came less frequently. The pain faded, the fear loosened its grip, and in its place grew something stronger: hope, joy, and the absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. She had chosen life over death, freedom over captivity, real love over false promises. And that choice had made all the difference. Juliet's story became a beacon of hope in her community. Women who were suffering in silence would come to her, seeking advice, seeking courage. She would hold their hands and tell them the truth, that leaving was terrifying, that starting over was hard, that there would be moments when they doubted themselves. But she would also tell them that their lives were worth fighting for, that their children deserved to grow up without violence, that real love existed and it didn't hurt. One woman in particular touched Juliet's heart. A young teacher named Blessing who had been married for only 8 months but had already suffered 3 brutal beatings from her husband. Blessing came to Juliet's support group with a broken arm and fear in her eyes, the same fear Juliet remembered seeing in her own reflection years ago. "I don't know if I can leave," Blessing whispered. "What if I can't make it on my own? What if he comes after me? What if my family blames me?" Juliet took Blessing's good hand in hers. "I had all those same fears," she said gently. "And I won't lie to you. Leaving was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But staying would have killed me. And I realized something important. Being afraid to leave is normal, but being afraid to stay should tell you everything you need to know. With Juliet's help and Raymond's support, Blessing found the courage to leave her abusive husband. Juliet connected her with a lawyer, helped her find a safe place to stay, and walked beside her through every terrifying step of the journey to freedom. Watching Blessing slowly transform from a frightened, broken woman into someone strong and hopeful reminded Juliet of how far she herself had come. As the years passed, Juliet and Raymond's family grew stronger. Chinita grew into a kind, gentle boy who loved reading and football. Amara became the light of the family. Raymond later became a very successful billionaire, and they live happily ever after. The end. Hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video for more interesting and intriguing story. See you on the next one.